Good, everyone. Welcome back to our next edition of Econ Talks. I'm here at Fieldays this year, a little bit of a different approach from what I normally try and record our Econ Talks from somewhere in the Infometrics boardroom, sometimes across the rest of the country, but I think important to try and get a bit of a view of what's happening on the ground at Field Days 2025. There's certainly a little bit more optimism than we saw in the last couple of years. A little bit of caution, I guess, Gareth, emerging from people. Not everyone is sort of immediately starting to bank what are some pretty good returns coming through. But the fact that commodity prices are in a better spot, that does seem to be bolstering a bit of activity. Just how good are the prices at the moment?
Yeah, look, we've seen an upward trend, obviously, in meat prices, dairy prices for over a year now. Horticulture prices have been at a strong level as well for quite some time. But through the course of this year, of course, we've had a bit of uncertainty coming through from the global economy and the sort of trade wars emerging out of America and just what that means for demand for our exports going forward. Still a bit early to tell, but looking at the latest commodity price index from ANZ, we just saw a little bit of weakness coming through in terms of horticulture prices and meat prices. They're only down slightly. You're talking less than 1% across each of those. Dairy prices still rising strongly, but we have seen, of course, in the latest couple of global dairy trade auctions that those prices have started to soften about 2.5% over the last 4 weeks or so. So again, still at high levels. And I mean, that's reinforced by the fact that when you look at the terms of trade, Stats NZ publishing data on that for the March quarter, and that's closed back into within 2.5% of its record high that it reached back in 2021. And simply put, if the terms of trade is high, it means that export prices are good, import prices are not, or imports are not so expensive, and so we can buy more for everything that we're exporting. So high terms of trade is obviously good for the broader economy as well. But it is, I guess, a question of looking forward and going, okay, what are we seeing in those commodity price numbers at the moment? There's nothing to be too concerned about, but we look forward and go, how's that Chinese demand looking? Given the sort of global unrest, how does that flow through in terms of expectations around revenue for farmers and profitability going forward as well? And I think probably one of the telling things over the last few weeks has been Fonterra's forecast payout for the new dairy season. They've started with not a midpoint, but with a forecast point of $10 per kilo of milk solids. That's where the previous season was as well. It's not as strong as those global dairy trade prices would suggest, but what was probably most interesting out of those numbers was the fact that Fonterra put out a not symmetrical range in terms of where that price may go over the course of the season. And so, again, just an alert there around what the downside risks might be if global trade conditions and the trade will deteriorate further from here. So Fonterra really communicating to farmers that at the moment prices look good, but we're just pretty uncertain about where they may go. And so, build some downside risks into your assessment. And I think that will probably link into some of that feeling that you're seeing there at Field Days at the moment in terms of, our revenue is up, our income is up, but still some caution around spending, I expect.
That's definitely true. And I think, talking to people on the ground already, it's very clear that people are in a much better spot. The, farming sector overall has seen those better returns coming through. But everyone is cautious, a little bit nervous about what's coming through as well on that global front, just the instability that's emerging and the risk of what it might do to prices in the future. But I think importantly that the difference at the moment is very much that people are in a good spot. They are reacting to that, but they also have a bit of an eye to the future. And I think that's why when we looked at our latest regional assessment in our Infometrics Quarterly Economic Monitor, you saw better results coming out of rural economies, still down, but in a much better space compared to the likes of urban centres, which just don't have that same level of support coming through. And again, what's interesting is that people on the ground here at Field Days do feel upbeat, but cautiously so, and like appropriately. People are saying, look, first and foremost, we're paying off a bit of debt first. We want to make sure that we're sort of able to regain some of that potential area that we'd had to build up in debt over time. Then we're doing a bit of deferred maintenance because we know we've got to make sure that our operations, to get those gains over time, we've actually invested in them right. And then only eventually after that do you see a bit more spending emerging. So there's a few operators here that have already been highlighting that, yep, there's some pretty good stuff happening. They're expecting more and more sales of different kit and equipment. But I think the other interesting trend that's coming through at Field Days, and actually looking at some of the numbers, is that the way that we're farming is changing. The actual number of tractors registered in New Zealand is actually lower than it was a couple of years ago, despite the fact that there's still going to be, I think, quite a big focus on that this year. Of course, the government's investment boost scheme will allow a greater level of capital investment across farm. But I think it'll be on an increasingly wide range of kit. And it's interesting at Field Days this year, there's a specific drone sort of area that you can go to understand sort of the agricultural applications of drones and other sort of technologies. So there is, I think, a real emerging shift here where people are trying to gear up for the future. They've got an eye on the global environment and the caution that might bring, but as well as that, some of the science and technology that comes through to make sure that they're not only in a good spot now and they can contribute to the economy, they can bring forward that high payout, but also that actually they're ready to go in a couple of years' time. Because as we've seen, not only is the global environment a lot more uncertain, but generally in the primary sector, you do have some pretty big ups and downs sometimes between different seasons and different commodities. The idea at the moment, I think, is to strengthen the base. If you've got a good position, now is the time to make sure that your roof is really strong, really well repaired, rather than waiting until a rainy day like it was last night. That's for sure. When it was buckling down, if you're trying to sort of repair things at that point, you're just sort of, going to come out as a bit looking like a bit of a drowned rat. So all of that's really interesting. The other point, and I think it goes to yours and what you were talking about, Gareth, in terms of that payout, the caution, everything else, is that it's still important to recognise that despite all of that, a little bit of nervousness there, things are in a way better spot this year than what they were last year. Last year people weren't spending as much on their exhibits here at Field Days. There wasn't that sort of same level of, again, just vim and vigour and activity. I mean, you can't quite see it, but the place behind me, there are just throngs of people that are coming through, expecting 10,000 over the next couple of days. Of both people who are deeply, deeply ingrained, they are the farmers that are wearing their red bands that are, caked in all sorts of unspeakable things, all the way through to people that are, that are connected with the sector, the family, the friends of people who want to sort of get amongst it. So it is, I think, quite useful to you get quite a wide vibe of how things are going here at Field Days. It's probably one of the longest Econ Talks we've done for a while, but there is just quite a lot to try and unpack in the primary sector. And so I think it was a good discussion to have. We'll follow up on all of this, how commodity prices go, what spending is like in rural communities, how many tractors there are registered at Field Days on one of our future editions of Econ Talks.